Miriam and Jess, again, that phrase became pretty easy for us to do because it was how we greeted each other in the morning. Good morning, Miriam and Jess. Hello is very long, Pershindetia, or you could say Tum. And so it was nice. Being over there 11 days, we actually were able to make connections with people, and they love it when Americans try to speak Albanian because we're horrible at it, but they appreciate the fact that we tried. And so we would be butchering their language, but they had a really big smile and correct us gently and say, well, actually, it's pronounced like this. So we use that song, People Need the Lord, because Kosovo is largely a Muslim country. I'm going to show a pie chart here soon of the percentage. And there's a general despair, there's a general lack of hope that you can just sense there because they don't have that hope in Jesus. They aren't assured of their salvation. Muslim teaches that if Allah wills, if you do enough good things and you gain His favor, perhaps you will go to paradise. And so even in their own religion, they don't have that assurance. And when we ran into Christians, a few that were there, it was amazing to see the hope that they had, the joy that they had, and how different that was from the people around them. So we're going to share today what we learned in Kosovo. And I say what we learned because short-term mission trips are more for the people who go than for who you go to. We spent a lot of money to get to Kosovo, and to stay in Kosovo, and to eat in Kosovo, and to come back from Kosovo. And if the church wanted to bless Kosovo, it probably would have been better to send that money to Kosovo directly. There's great people doing great stuff there. As a church, we believe that there's a lot of value in investing in the people who go on mission trips. I learned a life lesson about how God treats money when I was 17 on a mission trip, and it's guided my life since then. I'll share with you a few of the lessons that we learned in Kosovo. So do we do good when we're there? Yes, we do. But we're really investing in what we can learn on the teams that we take on mission trips. So we did good when we were there, but we believe that God does even more good in the people who say, yes, I will go. So if you're thinking about mission trips in the future, again, it's really the church investing in you. We go to places, whether it be Indiana or Kosovo or the DR or Colorado or wherever we go, and we try to do good there, we try to help, but we know that God really works within the people that we contact and the people who go. So I encourage you to consider going on some future mission trips. I'll give you a little bit of overview. So this was the city that we stayed in, Prizren, and it's quite a ways from here. So this is the flight we took. I'm not sure if it was just due to airspace or wind directions or whatever, but it definitely was not like a straight line over. And so we kind of went up to Greenland and Iceland and kind of took a big loop around there. It took about 10 and a half hours to get to Istanbul, and then we had a really short flight from Istanbul to Kosovo, or as the locals say, Kosovo. And so Kosovo is located, the slide moved, oh no, it's all right. So basically across from Italy, north of Greece, and just south of Serbia. So that's kind of where we were. And within Kosovo, we flew into Pristina, which is the capital up there with the red square. And then the whole rest of the time we stayed here in Prizren, which is kind of in the southern part of the country. So if you've heard of any unrest in Kosovo that's spilled over from the war 24 years ago, it's all in the very northern part there. There's still disputes on the border between Serbia and Kosovo. And so we were in the far south of the property, or of the country. This is what I was talking about before. So the blue represents those who are Kosovars who claim their religion as Muslim. So basically 96% of the population identifies as Muslim. Of them, they estimate that about 10 are devout, meaning that they go to the mosque on Fridays, which is their holy day, that they practice the daily prayers. So 5 times a day the call to prayer would come across the loudspeakers. And no one reacted. It was really odd. I was really expecting people to stop, pause, kneel down, face east, and pray. I didn't see a single person do that the whole time. Now, some people do that in their home. They have an hour to do it after each call to prayer. But it's mainly a secular country, but they identify as Muslim. Their family's Muslim. They kind of identify that. They know a little bit about the Quran. They can quote a few verses from the Quran, but they've never probably read the whole thing. The call to prayer comes across in Arabic, and no one speaks Arabic, so they don't understand the words being prayed over the loudspeakers. Most of them haven't learned to read Arabic, so they can't read the Quran, because Muslims believe that the only true Quran has to be in Arabic. If you read an English translation or an Albanian translation, you're not reading the Quran. You have to read it in the original language. So the vast majority identify as Muslim. The other two are Christian, Eastern Orthodox Christian, and Catholic Christians. You don't see Protestantism at all on the pie chart. 0.1% of the population identifies as, like we would, Protestant Christians. So there's this massive barrier to being a Christian in Kosovo. It's not what your family does, it's not what your culture acknowledges, it's just completely unheard of almost. So I was trying to give them a perception of what our life was like here in Wabash County, and I pulled some stats which I'll read for you too, just so you get a difference. So Prizren, the surface area of Prizren is almost identical to Wabash County. So if you take in Prizren and its surrounding little villages, kind of like the suburbs, it's almost identical to the size of Wabash County. There's 195,000 people in that area in Prizren, and in Wabash County there's about 28,000 of us in that same amount of surface area. So Prizren has 195,000 people in that area in 3 Christian churches. And those 3 churches have about 10 people in each of them. So there's about 30 Christians in that area. In Wabash County, again, with 30,000 people, we have 83 churches. So you can see the difference. In Prizren, what you see on every corner is a mosque. In Wabash County, what you see on every corner, every section corner, is a church. So that's the difference of the societies that we went into and the difference of the culture. And it was so nice to be the religious minority. Not because they're not Christian, but because it gives us a better perspective of what other people feel like in the United States. It gives you a sense of, wow, things are completely different if this isn't a Christian nation. Things felt different. Again, there was this sense of despair and no hope. They didn't have the hope that Christians have. So it was a great experience. I've never been in a situation where we've been that much in the minority as a religious organization, as a religious people. And it was really uplifting when you saw people saying, I'm a Christian. It goes against my complete family background. It goes against the culture. And I'm really proud of it. And I want you to know why I'm so proud to be a Christian. So we're just going to have everybody kind of talk through a part of it. Austin's up first. He wanted to get this over quickly, I know, so I put him first. He's going to kind of go over our travel, what we did there, kind of our daily routine, and then walking was actually quite a bit of a challenge there, so he's going to cover some of that for us.
Hi, my name is Austin, and today I'll be talking about the way there and back in our daily routine. So we left the church around 2:30 and stopped at a gas station. We're going into Chicago to use the bathroom and get some snacks. When we got to the airport, we had to get our tickets and get our passports checked. Then we went to our gate number and put our stuff down so we could use the bathroom and get something to eat. Then we got onto our 10-hour flight to Istanbul, which sleeping-wise is not the best, but the food was decent for being on a plane. When we landed in Istanbul, we had 4 hours before our next flight to Pristina. Which was about an hour flight. When we got to Pristina, we got into a line to get our passports checked, and then we got our luggage. When we came out of the airport, the missionaries were waiting for us in a white van and a black car, which they drove to drop us off at our hotel. When we got to our hotel, we checked in, and then we crashed once we got to our rooms. Our daily routine was we would wake up around 8:15. Then we went down to the breakfast area at 9. Then around 10, we would start our main thing of the day till about 12:30. Then we would go to a restaurant to eat lunch. Then in the afternoon, we'd have about 2 hours of relaxation time. Then we would do one smaller thing after that, after we got re-energized. Then we would go to another restaurant for our dinner. After that, we would go back to our hotel to do a devotion, talk about our day. Then we would shower and go to bed around 10. And on our way back, it was about a 45-minute drive to the airport, but around 20 minutes in, our van broke down. Luckily, the missionaries had friends that picked us up in 2 vans, which took us to the airport. When we got to the airport, we got our tickets, went through security, and got into the plane, which was an hour flight. Then when we got back to Istanbul, we had to stay at the airport for 7 hours before getting onto our 10-hour flight. When we finally got back to Chicago, the fun wasn't over because we had to stay in a line for 1 hour to get our passports checked. Then when we got picked up in a white van, which thank you to Jerry and Travis for taking us to the airport and picking us up. And then we drove for about 1 hour and 30 minutes till we got something to eat at Chick-fil-A. After that, we finally got back to the church around 4. My meaningful moment was when me and Calvin were playing soccer with a bunch of kids in the alley, and we couldn't understand each other. We were all still trying to understand each other, even though we both spoke different languages.
All right, thank you. You're going to hear a lot on this trip about relationships. And so we've asked everybody to give your most meaningful moment, and some of them are just those relationships that we built. So the Baumanns that are our missionaries there, there's a pastor of the church that's there, so their responsibility is not to lead the church. Their responsibility is to try to find new Christians. And how do you do that? You just have to build relationships. And so they're very good at just, no matter where they go, they know, you go into the grocery store and they know everybody there, because that's their job, is to make sure that they're showing people that, you want to know why I'm so happy? You want to know why I'm so content? It's because I've got God, I've got Jesus. And so they're always building these relationships. And so that's what we spent the majority of our time doing. So playing soccer with the kids in the alley was part of the mission. That was a big part of it. Hey, how do we communicate with them? Well, we can't, but we can play soccer. And so they can see that we play soccer differently. We're not going to try to trip them. Some of those kids were pretty mean. They were street kids that had to be street kids. Some of them were playing dirty, but ours didn't. So they stood out as a little bit different. They would say, nice shot. Didn't quite know what they did, but they didn't get mad when they got scored on. They were good, too. Football is like their major sport there. Soccer, what we call soccer, football. So they were really good at it. And it was something that they could share with them. So we were never downtime. When we were playing with the kids in the alley, that was mission work. When we were talking to people in the grocery store, that was mission work. These are the roads that we were walking down. And so it's interesting there. I didn't get any good video of it, but parents, you would have been scared to death, but we were very protective of your kids. Small streets, people drive on the sidewalk, so that car's not parked, they're driving. So most of the time it was safer to walk in the street and let the cars go around you on both sides of the sidewalk. Normally there was 3 cars going this way, so we all stayed in a line. I was normally in front, Laura was in the back, and we were constantly yelling at the kids. Car back, car front, car back, car left. No stop signs, no yield signs. It was just whoever could be aggressive got the next lane to go. So that was the scariest part of the whole trip as leaders, was just corralling everybody. And in Wabash, you could never walk this close to a car going the opposite direction, but there you had to. And so we got used to it. I don't know how, but you got used to it. And so we had to keep reminding everybody, hey, we're getting pretty confident walking into traffic, but let's not get lazy about looking for that. So Laura and I were always doing this the whole time. Nobody got hit. About the mission team that was there, I believe everybody's been hit over the course of time there. I don't think there's anybody who hadn't been hit. It's just how they drive. It's how they operate. They're very chaotic in the streets. So we made it all home safely, though. This is our van that we kind of took around the whole week. It did great until the last day. We took it up in the mountains, and it wasn't acting quite right, but it was limping along. And then, as Austin said, it died on us on our way to the airport. But there was another missionary team in the city that had died in. They were there within probably a half an hour, got us to the airport. We weren't even that rushed, so God was good. All right, next up we have Calvin, who's not here. He's on vacation with his family, but he's going to cover some of the church activities. If you could play that audio.
Hello, my name is Calvin, and today I will be talking about the church activities. The church is called The Nest. It is a small building with a small main floor and a little basement, which we help clean and organize one of our days. The pastor at The Nest is Pasha Mosque, while the Bowmans and another missionary named John from Australia help out with the church, like becoming praise leaders and occasionally speaking for the main service. For the church service, we set up chairs in the main area, and whichever pastor is speaking that day stands up in the front and preaches. Besides our large group, there's about 10 to 15 regulars that come. To start our service, we sang 2 to 3 Albanian worship songs that we at least tried to sing. And after that, the first week we got to hear Nate preach, while the local pastor, Pastor Basim, translated to English for all the other people. And the second week, Jason preached and talked about the stuff we've been doing, where we're from, and that stuff, while he also spoke in James. After the service, both times actually, there was fellowship with some snacks and drinks. My most meaningful moment throughout this trip was talking and getting to know some of the locals, because it was just cool to see how they live and how it's just different from our culture.
All right, you've heard 2 youth already say that their most meaningful moment was meeting other people. Again, that was the purpose of this trip. We weren't going to build a home. We weren't going to do some physical work, although we did some. You saw the basement that we cleaned out. It was to encourage the Christians who were there. They were just so thankful to be around. We doubled the size of their church when we came. Imagine how nice that would feel to us, as if we had the whole sanctuary filled and had to do another service one Sunday because all these other Christians came in. So there was a lot of encouragement that our presence just did. It was a lot of encouragement imagine you're the only 14-year-old girl in your city who's a Christian. We met her. And she's like, oh, wow, there's other girls my age. There's other boys my age who are Christians. She'd never seen someone her age as a Christian. So a lot of what we did was just encourage the people who were there, just through our presence and just the shared value of being Christian. Again, most of them spoke some English, and some of them spoke very good English. And so we were able to communicate with many of them, or if not, there would be somebody nearby who could translate. And what you saw was that we serve the same God. And the same Holy Spirit that's in us is in them. And so when we were trying to sing their songs, sometimes we would just, again, butcher the words, but we were singing. When we spoke as if we were speaking the very words of God. Because that's what we tasked ourselves to do. When we served, we acted as if we were serving because we were in the strength of God. And when you can do that, people recognize that. And it was encouraging. So it's really neat to see that we have teenagers saying some of the most important things in the thing was talking to people that I don't know, making new friends, going out and doing things that I'm not usually doing, and they saw the benefit of that. So Kaylee's going to come up and kind of talk about our hotel, kind of the food that we were eating. She ate pizza the whole time, so.
So I'm going to be talking about the food in the hotel. So the food there was pretty much the same as it is here, but the menus were obviously in Albanian, so we didn't really know that. I had pasta pretty much every night and for lunch. They had burgers, which weren't really the same as they were here. They were like different ingredients. So the texture was weird. They had chicken burgers and stuff. They had salads. And then they had like this goulash thing, but it's not the same as it was here. I didn't get it because it looked kind of gross. And so, yeah, that was mainly the food. Oh, they also had really good crepes and pancakes. And then the hotel was really nice. In the girls' room, which was me, Shelby, and Laura, we had a pretty big room, and then our roof kind of collapsed. And so we had to move into a very small room, but it was okay. And every morning for breakfast, we had to eat omelets and bread, and the omelets definitely got repetitive, but the bread was really good, so it was okay, I guess. And yeah. Oh, my most meaningful moment was the English class with the little kids.
Thank you. So this was the view from the top of the hotel. Really nice, and you can see that in any direction you looked in the city, it was surrounded by mountains. And so Prizren kind of sits in this valley you go up the mountains to get there, and you come back down into this valley. And so no matter what direction you looked at the top of the hotel, it was just a beautiful scene. It was a beautiful area to be in. Fairly high density of housing, as you can see, but just a beautiful city. And again, very nice accommodations. We ate and were served breakfast every morning. We ate at most meals. Food was really good and relatively cheap. They were normally, each meal would be 3 to 5 euros for a very nice meal. The bread was spectacular everywhere we went. You'll notice that on every plate you'll see cucumbers and tomatoes. That was served breakfast, lunch, dinner, so we ate a lot of those. There was a lot of Western food choices, as she mentioned, but their local foods were really good too. So a lot of shish kebab meats, a lot of marinated meats, a lot of different sausages, and like she said, the hamburger patty was often seasoned completely differently. So some really good opportunities for local fare too, but each restaurant that we went to had a lot of traditional dishes along with some Western dishes. Everything is fresh. You don't find anything out of season there. They're not like us where you have to have grapes year round and everything year round. It's what's in season is there. And so the food and the fruit and the vegetables were really good. This was kind of one of their favorite treats. We're going to start looking for this at Aldi's and see if they happen to have it. We ended up in a lot of coffee shops. That's where people gathered throughout the day. And so we would meet people there. We would just kind of go there on our own, but we were typically in several coffee shops each day. Which their coffee was good, but it's all milk-based. I'm used to just a black coffee, so I had to offer order Americanas all the time. But if you just ask for coffee, you're basically getting a mocha there. It's a little bit of coffee and a whole lot of milk. So if you like that, that's your place to go. It's a lot of milk in their coffee. And again, when we were eating, we'd interact with the waiters. They'd be curious of why Americans are here. A lot of people there are trying to get to America or trying to get to other places in Europe. So they're just fascinated, like, why did you come here? And it gave us a great opportunity to say, oh, we're actually here to talk to people about Jesus who are interested. Have you heard about Jesus? Oh, I've heard a little bit, not much. Sometimes I would enter into a conversation. Can't see him, but he's right behind Laura. Basim was a gentleman probably about my age, and we had coffee with him probably 3 different times. He was kind of uncomfortable around the kids, and so he and I would kind of go off to the end. That's why we're kind of at the end of the table, and we would have discussions about what it's like to be a father, what it's like to raise kids in different environments. Again, very similar things. He's becoming a Christian and just needed that reassurance that this is the right way. And so we had those conversations over coffee. Again, there was never a moment wasted because, as this says, if we go through our day speaking the words of God, serving in God's way, we can do that no matter where we're at, whether in Legro, Wabash, or Kosovo. Anna's going to come and talk about prayer walking, which we did quite a bit, and some other things that we did through the week.
So one activity that we did a lot was prayer walking. Several times throughout the trip, we would break off into smaller groups and prayer walks. So each time we would go to a different part of the city and just pray for whatever we saw. It could be a specific person or several people or just whatever came to mind. I really appreciated doing this because it created a lot of mindfulness and helped us regain focus for what we were doing. The other girls and I also got to participate in a women's prayer group that the church holds, and it was really cool to be able to do that. It started off with just some conversation and introductions, and then anyone who had a prayer request could share it. The women take turns leading it, and whoever leads writes down the requests in a notebook. That way they can look back and see all the prayers that have been answered.
Once everyone shared their requests, Meta, who was the one leading that day, assigned each of us one thing to pray about, and we just went around the table until everyone was finished. I thought it was a really cool experience because we were each praying for someone else, and like one of the Albanian women prayed for Shelby's grandma, even though she had no idea who she was, and we had no idea what she was saying because it was in Albanian. So it just felt like there was so much connection and support between people that we'd never seen before and we'll probably never see again. So I think it was a really unique experience and we all really enjoyed it. Nate and Meta also put on a Bible club for their kids and a few other kids. We got to lead a lesson while we were there over the armor of God. Kaylee and Austin read and explained the passage. Claire and Shelby did an experiment with an orange to demonstrate how the armor of God protects us. And in the end, the kids and I dressed up Calvin in armor made out of aluminum foil. So that was a lot of fun, and when the lesson was over, we played dodgeball and ate snacks. My most meaningful moment was listening to Ben, who worked at the hotel, talk about his life and how he's currently searching for purpose and for the truth, and he talked about how he's exploring different religions and talking to different people. And I could just see how passionate he was and how deeply he cares about life and spirituality and just finding what's right. And I thought it was really interesting because I've never heard anyone speak so openly and clearly about that before, but it was also really inspiring because for me, Christianity can get kind of normalized and mundane, and hearing his perspective, which is so different from my own, reminded me that it's not boring and everyone experiences faith in a different way. So I just really appreciated listening to him speak.
And Ben was a worker there at the hotel that we ran into most days. Just had general conversations with him, but then one morning, Claire and Anna, we were waiting on some other people to come downstairs. We were getting ready to go for the day. And they just had this really meaningful discussion with him. He knew that he was drawn towards truth. He knew that truth exists, and he knew that he needed to follow it. But he wasn't certain that he was finding truth in Islam. And so they had this extremely good conversation. And Laura and I kind of came up and would chime in occasionally, but those two girls were witnessing to Ben Hameen, and it was amazing. He opened up like he hadn't opened up to anybody because there was two people in front of him who were interested. And so he was able to quote a few things from Quran. He was able to quote a few things from the Bible. We asked, well, how are you exploring this? And he's like, well, I've talked to a priest. I've talked to Eastern Orthodox. I've talked to my imam. And we asked, well, you want to come to church with us on Sunday? And he couldn't because he was working. But he's going to start exploring what does truth look like in Protestantism. Don't know where that's going to lead. But if he does, he's going to find truth and it's going to connect with him. And he's like, that's the truth. God was leading him. It was obvious. He's like, I know there's truth, but I haven't quite found it. Like, that's kind of why we're here. So again, conversations over a front desk turns into something that could have eternal consequences. Shelby, doing our English classes.
I'm Shelby, and I'm talking about the English class. So we did the class with John at the Nest, which is our church. And the girls did English class one day, and then the boys did it the other. We had a class with them, and we played Uno. The kids were Yasin and Ella. Yasin was from Kosovo, and Ella was from Turkey. We started off by having questions on the board, and then would pass out the cards to each person, and the person would read the question on the board, then ask the question to the person beside them. And for example, they'd be like, what's your favorite color? And it was a really good way to get to know them. But then after that, we kind of just played Uno, and it was really fun. But my most meaningful moment was probably just getting to know everybody.
The kids loved that they were learning English. A lot of people there are really adamant about learning English so they can come to America or come to another English-speaking country. And so they were just thrilled to have not just adults teaching them, but now they had some teenagers teaching them and could practice their words with them. And so, like I said, we did this twice, one with the girls, one with the guys, and that was really a lot of people's favorite time, just to see their excitement about learning English and their openness to it. So, all right, now Laura's going to come talk about. We took one day where we were just kind of like a tourist. You know, we just kind of went around and looked at some of the older buildings and older structures. But again, we had lots of opportunities that day to witness also.
All right, so of course mine's printed because I'm 43. Not on my phone. Okay, I will be sharing about our tourist spots that we explored and learned about with our tour guide, Kayela. She is a Christian believer, which again, just to note how rare that was to find other believers in Kosovo. And we found out she currently lives in the capital city of Pristina with her mom and one of her sisters. And just really enjoyed getting to know her. And honestly, I wish she could have stayed with us a bit longer because her perspective is just so interesting. But on Wednesday morning, we set out after breakfast by foot, of course, walking, to explore and learn more about the prison tourist spots. Our first stop, which wasn't really official, but I thought I'd go ahead and, oh, you got a picture of it, was we were outside of a closed Turkish bath, and I did a little bit of extra research because I didn't quite catch everything. So it said that it was built in the mid-1500s and restored in the 1800s, and I read that it included all the areas required for a Turkish bath. So it included an entry area, wardrobe, central part, sweating area, entertainment area, heating area, and then since 2000, the cold part of the bath has been used as a gallery for organizing cultural, artistic, and educational activities. And the way the bath is structured, that it is particularly characteristic of the Ottoman era in Prizren, so it bears historical, architectural, and social features. And then next, we moved on to the monumental complex of the Albanian League of Prizren. And this complex is under the state protection and is home to photographs, documents, clothing, and other cultural artifacts that date from the time of the League of Prizren. And it has three main sectors. The first is the League of Prizren residence, which Jason did not height-wise fit into very well. I don't know if we have a picture or not of that in the historical sector, but it showed the history of the League and written documents, old weapons, paintings, and then paintings of historical and political figures of the League. And then once we left that residence, we moved on to the Madriz, or the school, and it had an ethnographic sector with the ground floor showing all the characteristic adornments and wardrobe of all the different types of Albanian-influenced inhabited areas. And then upstairs was this really cool art gallery, and I think that several of us took several pictures that day of all of the art that they had to show that of their unity as Albanians. The League was active with date ranges from 1878 to 1881, and it managed to bring national interests together. And it said that its biggest noted success was that both Montenegro and Greece received less of the Albanian claimed territory than they would have otherwise without their organized protest of the League, and that Albanians from different areas were able to find common ground to promote peace among one another, to protest and fight for their way of life. So they talk about in Kosovo that they're Kosovos, but they're Albanians, especially on the southern end, and then probably Muslim second. So then we moved on next to I'm going to butcher this, the Sinan Pasha Mosque. It's the what you'll see in almost every landscape. But it was built in 1615, and it overlooks the main street of Prizren and is a dominant feature of the town skyline. It is even featured in the background of my cute little Prizren magnet that I picked up before I left. So before we walked into the mosque, we were asked to remove our shoes, and they had bins available for easy storage. Inside, I've read that the walls in the dome were painted and completed in the 19th century, where we mostly saw floral patterns and Quran verses. And then they also said that the stone flooring was the original flooring that we were on. and I assume the wall and structure as well. There was like windows, but they were like windows that you could put your body down through, so the walls were really, really, really thick. And a few of us even looked at the mosque and just how it was shaped. We almost wondered if it had been a Catholic church at any point, but there wasn't really any evidence to support that. And then as we were leaving, poor Kayla was also scolded by the cleaning woman coming back from break because we all had shorts and capris on and we were not covered. And so she got in a little bit of trouble for that. But then right before we reached our final destination with Kayla, we found ourselves filling up our water bottles at the springs of the Shadowrun Square. And the legend is that if you do not have love, you will find love in Prizren. And if you already have found love, at the very least, you will be compelled to visit the city another time if you drink from the fountain. Many of us filled up that day, and several other times during the day. The water was so cool, refreshing, and was just a constant, which I guess is a thing here in Indiana too, but I was, of course, shocked because I'd never seen that before. And then our final destination with Kyla was the Catholic Church. It was the Cathedral of Our Lady of Perpetual Succor, which is also Perpetual Help, which is the title given to the Virgin Mary. When we reached the Catholic Cathedral, Nyela pointed out a wall that had been discovered that was going around the building, and she believed that wall had been built all the way back in the 5th century. And then inside the church, we saw the Stations of Christ painted on the walls. Like, it's hard to describe it, just beautiful. And then a lot of other beautiful details. And then I also read that the cathedral was the seat of the Albanian Roman Catholic Diocese of the Prizren, Pristina area, and that the clock tower had been built by a Croatian monk and architect. And then on the north side of the church, there was this sculpted chest of this man named, I'm going to screw this up too, Skanderbeg, who was this military commander. He was a part of the royal family who'd been captured by the Ottomans, and then the Ottomans trained him to be a military commander, and then he left them to go home and then use those tactics to help as a military commander for against the Ottoman Empire then. And so he's a military hero in Kosovo. Then, after that, you may have noticed in one of the pictures we had the mosque, there was like this blue house. There was a restaurant where we ate, and we had chicken kebabs and, of course, really great bread. And then after that, Uncle John, who was their ministry partner from Australia, who's lived there about 20 years, he took us, where am I? Oh, on our journey up to the castle or the fortress. So our final site. So let's see, I had read that this was reconstructed in the 18th century, but the site itself in Prizren had seen habitation in use since about 2000 BC. And there were archaeological excavations that were carried out in 1969, 04, and then again 09, 10, 11. And these excavations resulted in the discovery, this is so cool, where there were infrastructure where there were rampart walls that had towers, labyrinth corridors, depots, and other accompanying inner rooms and dwellings. It was basically a safe haven when people would come to attack, so they would find these different tunnels and caverns to get through to get to the top. But then in 1948, it was declared a monument of culture and of exceptional importance. And this is kind of my humorous part here. So in my journal I wrote, following the long legs, which I thought I had long legs, but I don't compared to our, who we were following the long legs of John and Jason, along with the youth, was a little tough because we took no breaks as we climbed a very, very steep mountain. However, amazing views almost the whole walk up if you stopped long enough to snap a pic, or in my case, snap a pic to catch my breath and show functionality in my stop. It was quite a hike. And also when I looked back at my Fitbit to see what was recorded, it thought that I had recorded a 37-minute workout, and I burned almost 200 calories. And for a typical workout for me, over an hour is 200 calories. So, for the future, I've decided that if I want to cut my workout time in half, then I just need to keep up with Jason, Uncle John, this group of youth, going up a really steep mountain. But of course, once we reached the top, the view was amazing. Oh God. You could see the entire city of Prizren along with a few villages. And we were sure to take lots of pics and soak in the moment. It was really beautiful from up there. And then once we had explored and walked around a bit, we headed back down a steep descent, which was a bit tricky, but we were able to mostly stay together and remain injury-free. And I must say that I had really been looking forward to this part of the trip, and I really enjoyed just the discovery and the exploration and the education of that part of the trip. So now on to my most memorable moment. I had a really hard time narrowing it down, but the one that I sat on that God gave to me first was the first moment, our first morning there in Prizren, watching the Baumans interact with the staff at Meridian, which was a bakery and coffee shop, and then interact with everyone as they entered the nest for the church service. It just became immediately apparent to me that both Nate and Meta are building intentional, meaningful relationships with the people they encounter. Whether it was the owner of a bakery, or a ministry partner like Pastor Basim, or someone that was new to the faith like Valentina, they are taking time to get to know them personally and intentionally for Christ's kingdom. And then because of that, our group was able to reap the benefits of that trust and of that love that they have built to then make connections and friendships of our own. So the Baumans are truly making the most of their opportunities. And I was blessed to see the ministry in action. And then one more thing, since I kind of always break the rules. My second most meaningful moment was our Last Supper as a group and a ministry team and having communion together as well.
Shelley shopping. All right, now we're going to hear from Claire again through the audio.
My name is Claire, and I'm going to be talking about the testimonies we heard over the course of our trip in Kosovo. There are two testimonies that stand out to me during this trip, both from men who lived their whole lives in Kosovo and left the religions they were raised in. Basim was the first testimony we heard. He is the pastor of the church our trip was based in. He found Christ after finding a community of Christians that sparked an interest of Protestant faith in him. He became a devout Christian in his 20s before the Serbian war that struck his area in Kosovo. He felt God's hand of protection, sparing and guiding him and his family during those dark times. His testimony taught of faith, obedience, and God's love. The next testimony came from a young man in his 20s named Chris. Chris found God in an area where Christ followers are few and far between. After being saved, he boldly proclaimed his faith and brought his girlfriend to faith and introduced his mother to church. His story taught me of boldness and an internal perspective of the world. Both of these testimonies are very personal, powerful, and unique. These stories show me the different traits of God and his connection with each of us. My most impactful moment was the women's prayer meeting. The prayer meeting was attended by all the females in the mission trip and many of the females from church in Kosovo. It was really cool to have people speaking in different languages, praying for each other, but still talking to the same God.
So this picture is Pastor Basim. There's not many people his age, which is pretty much my age. Before UN got involved, the Serbians were just coming through and wiping out all men of fighting age, and he was about 25 at the time. And so his village and towns next to him were being destroyed. Something caused the army to stop for a moment. He was able to escape from the attic, which he was hiding, which they were getting ready to burn, go next door and hide in the flower patch. They came back, torched his home, torched everything else around him, and he was able to escape. And so he credits that to God. And became a pastor, became a Christian, and 4 months later, someone came and threatened their church. So he was attending this church as a brand new Christian. Somebody came in with a knife saying, hey, you're trying to convert my brother, and you're bringing dishonor to our family. The pastor who was there kind of got scared and left. And so they said, well, do you want to be the pastor? He's like, well, I've been a Christian like 2 months. I'm like, that's okay. And he did. And so he's been the pastor of that church for now years. Has gotten training and has led that church just as a faithful steward of what God has called him to. And his testimony was, I knew it was the truth because when I read the Bible, I tested everything that God said. And when I turned the other cheek, lo and behold, something good happened. God's promises are true. He tried them. He said, that's how I knew it was true. When God says something and I did it, what God said would happen, happened. Wow, that's amazing. We believe that, but how many of you have tested that? You know, how many of you have said, God, if you're there, I'm going to do exactly what you said, even though this seems counterintuitive. And then God comes through. He's like, that's the truth. That's what Ben's looking for. That's what Sophie is looking for. This isn't Chris. I couldn't find a picture of Chris who she was talking about, but this is Sophie on the right. Reminds me a lot of my friend. Knows a lot about Christianity, but is very logical in his thinking and can't get over the fact that there's a God who would love him that way. There's no reason for a God to love him that way. And I'm like, you're right. There's not. But he did, and he does. We had great conversations because it was just like talking to my friend. I mean, it just felt like it was the same person. I said, well, God is leading you. Why do you keep debating me and Nate? And I said, you obviously have some interest. God is drawing you to him. I said, it might take you a while to get there. We had great conversations. Again, people, when you don't have truth, you're always going to be looking for it. When you don't have contentment, you're always going to be looking for it. Whether you're in Kosovo or here. Some people look for it in relationships. Some people look for it in jobs. Some people look for it in alcohol. Some people look for it in religions that aren't true, but they're never satisfied. And so there's a whole country of people dissatisfied and without hope looking for truth. And the Baumanns are doing that every day. And we learned how you do that is over pizza, over coffee. It was great. We learned how to witness so well there. Just a few group shots. Happy people going around town was unusual. No one smiled at you. We looked like freaks out there smiling at people and waving and being happy. Everybody was like this. And people were an obstacle, just something to get around. There was never any, hey, why would you? It's just wasting your time. You don't know where your life is going. You're making $300 a month on average is what people make over there. And you have no hope for what's coming next. So why waste your time interacting with people? And so a bunch of friendly kids smiling and waving was really unusual. That drew attention. People there love Americans because we helped save all their men. They love Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton is like the best guy ever over there because he was the president at the time. So you saw all these happy people going around, enjoying each other, trying to invest in people. And so that's what it was. It was a time about relationships. This was Claire's last trip, so I made her there was Haribo everywhere, which I love. No Albanese in sight. Claire and I have had this ongoing debate for 7 years now about which is the best, and of course Haribo is. They were the originator of the first gummy bears. Anyhow, so I made her take this picture of me in the airport. Relationship building. The kids there, the Baumanns' children, they were really just thrilled to have other people, again, other Christians there near their age to interact with, so they wrote us some nice little notes at the end. And then, as Laura mentioned, we have this closing ceremony where we just acknowledge that this group will likely never be together again. Jesus knew that the 13 in the room there, he had his Last Supper, that those 13 would never be together in that same way again. And so we had this with the Ballmans and John, who was with us all week, and just a really meaningful moment to kind of commemorate the time that we had together, sharing about what we appreciated about each other. So it was a trip about relationship. And what we learned coming from it, I'll give you a very brief thing, it's kind of what I did the sermon on there, is we left inspired. We were inspired by their courage of being Christians. Some of them would get disowned by their family if they chose to become a Christian. Their family would have nothing to do with them because they brought shame to their family by becoming a Christian. You go to work and you're the only Christian in your work. You go out to the grocery store, you're the only Christian in the grocery store. You go through life being the only Christian in your area until you go to church. And then there's 10 of you. And yet, they are very bold about saying, I'm a Christian, and I want to tell you about my God. They have these huge barriers of telling people that they're a Christian or being identified as a Christian, but they do it. We often think, well, what if somebody would make fun of me at work? We're surrounded by Christians in America. 83 churches in Wabash County. And yet sometimes we're reluctant. Well, what would they think of me if I mention that? Am I going to seem too Jesus-y? Is it going to embarrass me? We got these little, tiny, insignificant, silly little hurdles that sometimes keeps us from sharing about God. They've got these major barriers. I might lose my whole family if I acknowledge that I'm a Christian, but I'm a Christian. And that's important to me. In fact, that's the most important thing to me. We witnessed that. That's why all of us were saying the most important thing in the trip was hearing testimonies, building those relationships, seeing people catch on that there is a true God. It's amazing what they will do to acknowledge themselves as Christians and how we often shy away from it. We came back bolder in our witness because of them. That's something that they taught us. We also were reminded of the inequity that exists in the world, not only there, but in Wabash County also. So all these restaurants that we went into that were $3 and $5 a meal, that was too expensive for 99% of people who lived there. And so the restaurants would be empty other than us. And we got to start to feel like it felt wrong at some point. It's like, man, we're living in luxury here, when most people aren't. Most people are living on $300 a month, and $200 of that's tied up in your housing, utilities, those kinds of things. So they have basically $100 of discretionary money a month. And you can't afford to go in that restaurant. And we realized the burden that is. Not only there, but here. There's people in Wabash County, Huntington County that struggle with income. And we need to be more aware of that. We need to be more aware, more loving, more giving. It just felt weird. We had a great discussion on Tuesday night that, man, we're so blessed. And a lot of times we don't even recognize it. And so there in Kosovo was a city of differences. So you'd have a building built in the 11th century next to a brand new Burger King. And then you'd have a really nice home and someone lives in the garage next door. And so there's all this juxtaposition of wealth and no wealth, new versus old, Muslim versus Christian, all these different things coexisting together. And we just all felt this deep responsibility of making sure that we are using the wealth that we have in the best way that we can. We often say that from this pulpit, that we are among the wealthiest people in the world. It became obvious, more obvious there. But it's obvious if you go into parts of Wabash County. So it gave us a renewal of helping that inequity when we can. And what else stood out is there's not an iniquity in God's presence and God's love. He doesn't discriminate based on what you have, where you live. That plane could have landed anywhere in the world and God would still be God and people would still have people needs. And lo and behold, the solution to those people needs is God. God doesn't matter where He is. He is always God. And so it's just a great reminder that wherever we go in the world, people are people. people have needs. We share common needs, concerns, and that God is God. God is the way, the truth, and the light that people are looking for. And we were able to share that a little bit there. But they made us come home better Christians. They made us come home emboldened to share who God is with our friends, our family. Again, we don't have any barriers. Our barriers are just our own selfishness, if anything, or our own comfort. That's nothing compared to losing your job, losing your family, being ostracized for the rest of your life. I mean, come on. We can surely face the potential of some embarrassment. They are growing God's kingdom. They are growing it there. They're growing it here because they've inspired us to do the same and more. So we're just really thankful for the trip. We want to end with a few thank yous. Follow-Menderits. So Follow-Menderit, again, was a word that we used a lot. Just thank you. We want to thank God for giving us the opportunity. You, as our church, being able to support us through money and through prayer. The parents who are letting their youth go on this trip. The Ballmans who hosted us. Hannah, who was a college student who stayed in one of the rooms with the girls. So we had an adult female in each room. John, who was there with us the whole week. Their church. Jerry for driving us to the airport. Travis for driving us back. And each other. You know, it was a trip of relationships. And not only did we expand our relationships to our sister church there in Kosovo, but really deepen the relationships with each other. We had a lot of time together, a lot of time to talk. We got to know each other a lot better on this trip. So thank you for your role as a church in supporting all the mission trips that we do, all the missionaries that we do. And we got to see firsthand the great work that the Ballmans are doing. Just those relationships building, and got to participate in that. So thank you for that. Any other questions, just come talk to us afterwards, and I'll put this all in the youth blog. In addition to how you can support the Ballmans, they're looking for a bigger space, which is nice because the nest is getting too small for the people that are gathering there. So I'll give you some opportunities to even participate more in what they're doing. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for, again, your support. And let's end in prayer. Father, we just thank you for being God, and being a God that's just overwhelmingly unexpected to people who aren't used to hearing the message. Help us to hear it with fresh ears too, that we'd mess things up, but you loved us enough to give us a way to make that relationship right. You as God sacrificed yourself. That's an outrageous message that a lot of the world hasn't heard and can't believe. Help us to understand how outrageous that is. Help us to understand that everybody needs to hear that. Help us to be bold enough to share that. Help us to get over whatever silly barrier that we might have, fear of rejection, fear of just, I don't know what. We have very limited limitations. Thank you for giving us that opportunity. Help us to take it. Please continue to bless the work that the Ballmans are doing, and John and Pastor Basim and everybody else there in Kosovo, and just let those Christians know that they are loved, that they have support from everybody around the world, that there is a sisterhood and a brotherhood of Christians, because you are our God. And you're the same here as you are there, as you're the same everywhere. We thank you for that. We thank you for this opportunity, and we thank you for the lessons that we're still to learn from it. We appreciate that you've blessed us, you've blessed this church with the ability to support missionaries and go out and visit them. Help us to do that today. Help us to do that this week, wherever we go, whether it be Fort Wayne or Wabash or Huntington or Warsaw. We have the same opportunity to do that right now, right here. Thank you. We love you. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. You are dismissed.